You were the problem child, the difficult one, the reason your mother cried, your father raged, your siblings walked on eggshells. When the family was tense, everyone knew somehow it was your fault, even when you weren't in the room, even when you did nothing wrong. You become the lightning rod for every unexpressed emotion, every unresolved conflict, every crack in your family's foundation. And the worst part, you started to believe them. Maybe you're the one who apologizes reflexively, even when someone else is clearly at fault. You hear criticism that wasn't spoken, read anger into neutral faces, brace yourself for impact in every interaction. You're hypervigilant in ways other people don't understand. You can read a room in seconds, detect the slightest shift in someone's mood, sense conflict brewing before anyone raises their voice. It's not a superpower, it's survival. Maybe you achieve incredible things but can't enjoy them because success feels dangerous. Or maybe you self sabotage right before the finish line because failure is familiar, expected, and almost comforting. You have spent your whole life being told you're the broken one, and some part of you still believes it. This isn't random. This is a role you were cast in before you were old enough to understand. What you experienced is called scapegoat child syndrome. The family system's dynamic where one child is designated as the source of the family's problems. In dysfunctional families, there is always tension nobody wants to address. Unresolved trauma, the cracks in a marriage, addiction, shame that spans generations. These are the real problems, but they're too big, too threatening to face directly. So, the family system does something insidious. It finds someone to blame instead, and that someone was you. You become the repository for everything the family couldn't process, the target for displaced anger. When your father was frustrated, you were disrespectful. When your mother was drowning in her own wounds, you were ungrateful. The family needed a problem they could point to and control, and you were it. The family system becomes unstable. A new sibling, a parent's addiction, financial collapse, or any kind of situation. Instability is terrifying. So, unconsciously, the family starts looking for an explanation, and they find you. Maybe you are more sensitive, more likely to react emotionally. Maybe you look like the parent who left. Maybe you asked uncomfortable questions. Maybe you were just there, available, vulnerable enough to absorb the blame. Your parents didn't decide to destroy you. Most scapegoat parents are acting out their own unhealed trauma. Your mother, who called you selfish, might have been the forgotten child herself. Your father, who said you were too sensitive, might have had his emotions beaten out of him. They were drowning in pain they never learned to process, and you become the life raft they pushed underwater. The family reinforced this role in thousands of small ways. When something went wrong, everyone's eyes turned to you. Your siblings learned quickly if you were the problem, they were safe. Family gatherings become performances where you played the villain. The narrative calcified. You weren't a child making mistakes, you were the problem. As a child, you developed sophisticated survival strategies. You become the hyper-aware of everyone's emotional state because your safety depended on reading the room correctly. This wasn't anxiety, this was adaptive intelligence. Some scapegoat children try to be perfect. You thought if you could just be good enough, they would see they were wrong about you. You become the parentified child, taking care of everyone's emotions, trying to fix what was broken. Others become the problem they said you were. If you were going to be punished anyway, you might as well deserve it. Acting out gave you control. At least, when you misbehaved, you knew why they were angry. When the blame descended, you went somewhere else in your mind. You made yourself numb. You learned not to cry because crying made it worse. You learned not to defend yourself because that proved you were difficult. These coping mechanisms worked. They kept you alive. That child who learned to absorb blame saved your life. The problem is, you're still using those strategies now. In situations where you don't need to survive anymore, you need to live. Now, decades later, you still flinch when someone raises their voice. You still apologize for existing. You still scan every room for danger, read every text for hidden criticism. You choose relationships that confirm what you learned, that love is conditional, that your presence is a burden. You're drawn to people who need saving because being needed feels safer than being wanted. You end up being with partners who are critical or emotionally unavailable, not because you like pain, but because it's familiar. At work, you're either the overachiever who can't accept praise or the self-sabotager who confirms your unworthiness right before success. You do the work others take credit for because being seen feels dangerous. You struggle with boundaries because you never learned you were entitled to them. You say yes when you mean no. When someone treats you poorly, your first instinct is to figure out what you did wrong. You're exhausted, bone-tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, because you've been carrying responsibility for other people's emotions since you were too young to understand what was happening. You have lost years trying to earn love from people who were never capable of giving it. You have sacrificed dreams because some part of you believed you didn't deserve them. And somewhere deep inside, there's still a child who believes the lie, who thinks maybe they really were the problem. Here's what you need to understand now. Scapegoating is never about the child. It's always about what the family can't face. You were chosen not because of who you were, but because of what the family system needed. Dysfunctional families operate on an unspoken rule. We don't talk about the real problems. Those truths are too destabilizing. They would require change, vulnerability, accountability. So, the family finds a common enemy, you. Blaming you gave everyone else an identity. We're the good ones. It protected the parents' self-image. We're not bad parents. We just have a difficult child. It united the family against a common target, and it kept everyone from looking at the real dysfunction. The message encoded into your nervous system was, your existence is a burden. Your emotions are an inconvenience. You are fundamentally unacceptable. Not because it was true, but because the family needed that message to function. You experienced complex developmental trauma. Not one event, but an environment full of it. A relentless pattern that shaped your core beliefs about yourself, about relationships, about the world. But here's the truth. A family that's actually functional doesn't need a scapegoat. Healthy families can tolerate each member's complexity without designating one person as the problem. The fact that your family needed someone to blame reveals everything about the family. It reveals nothing about you. None of this was your fault. Not the role you were given, not the beliefs you internalized, not the ways you learned to survive. You were just a child. A child cannot be responsible for a family system's dysfunction. You couldn't have been better behaved. because it was never about your behavior. It was about what your presence allowed everyone else not to face. That child who absorbed blame, who took on adult problems, who made themselves small trying to earn love, they were doing the best they could. They were resourceful, courageous. The fact that you survived is a testament to your resilience. Your hypervigilance wasn't weakness, that was brilliant adaptation. Your people pleasing wasn't pathetic, that was a survival strategy. Your difficulty trusting wasn't paranoia, that was pattern recognition. Your body learned what your family taught. People who claim to love you will hurt you. The fact that you're watching this, seeking to understand what happened, that's not broken. That's someone who survived something that should have destroyed them and is now brave enough to begin healing. You deserved better. You deserved parents who could handle their own emotions. You deserved to be loved, not despite who you were, but because of it. The shame you carry doesn't belong to you. Healing doesn't mean you have to forgive anyone if you are not ready. It means learning to see yourself clearly, not through the distorted lens of people who needed you to be the problem. This work often requires professional support. Look for therapists trained in complex trauma or family systems work. Internal family systems can help you understand the different parts of yourself. EMDR can help process stored trauma. Somatic therapies can help release the tension you've been holding for decades. Boundaries will be essential. You might need to limit contact with family members who still see you through the scapegoat lens. You might need to grieve the family you deserved but never had. This pattern can change, not overnight, not without setbacks, but it can change. You can learn to choose relationships where your presence is wanted, where your needs matter, where making mistakes doesn't make you unlovable. The narrative you were given doesn't have to be the one you keep telling. You weren't born the problem child. You were born into a family that had problems they couldn't face, and they made you carry them. That was never your job. It was never your fault. And it doesn't have to be your identity anymore. If this resonated with you, you're not alone. Understanding this pattern is the first step to breaking free from it. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing. I explored childhood wounds and the patterns they leave behind. And remember, questioning the narrative you were given is an act of rebellion. It's also an act of healing.